My husband called me mediocre. So I had an affair. 6 months later, I lost my kids, my marriage, and the man I chose over them. I was already cheating when he said it. 4 months deep into an affair I had convinced myself was justified. The guilt had dulled. The lies had become routine. And then Marcus looked at the eggs I made him on a Saturday morning, exhaled like I was an inconvenience he had been enduring for years, and said one word: mediocre. I grabbed that word like a life raft. I told myself it was the reason. The permission. The final proof. 6 months later, I was sleeping alone in a one-bedroom apartment. My children were 4 days away per month, and the man I had chosen over my marriage had stopped answering my calls. That word did not destroy my life. I did. But it took me a long time to stop blaming the word. That is where this ends. Now let me show you exactly how it started, and every place I could have chosen differently, and didn't. 7 years. We met when I was 26. 2 years of dating, an engagement, a wedding in a venue I had dreamed about since I was a teenager, exposed brick, string lights, jasmine in the garden at night. The kind of wedding where people stay late and speeches run long and someone cries in the bathroom in the best way. Lily came 18 months after. Caleb 2 years after Lily. By 33, I had a 4-bedroom house in a suburb I had chosen, 2 children I genuinely loved, and a husband who never hit me, never cheated on me, and sat with me in silence for 2 full days after a miscarriage between the 2 pregnancies, not trying to fix it. Not explaining. Just present. He was not a bad man. I need to say that clearly because I spent a year trying to convince people otherwise and none of them believed me. They were right not to. Marcus was quiet. Not naturally romantic. He forgot our anniversary twice, genuinely, not passive-aggressively. After Caleb was born, when I was deep in postpartum fog and needed more than I was getting, he prioritized his job in a way that left me feeling invisible, and that was a real failure. Those things cause real pain. But they are pebbles. What I did with them was build a mountain, label it evidence, and present it to myself as justification for everything that came after. That is not having a reason. That is having an excuse wearing a reason's clothes. Here is what I did not understand at the time. I was being quietly redirected by someone I trusted. My best friend Renee had just left her own husband and was in the high of new freedom. Every other week she told me I looked tired. That I deserved more. That I was, in her exact words, too much woman for Marcus. She said it with love. I absorbed it as truth. What I understand now, with a clarity that only comes after losing everything, is that Renee was not trying to liberate me. She was building company in her own disrupted life. I was a perfect candidate because I was already quietly dissatisfied and could be nudged rather than pushed. I loved Renee. I also gave her far too much authority over the story I told myself about my own marriage. And then there was Instagram. I am not blaming the application. I am blaming myself for what I chose to consume and what I let it do to my perception over months. But there is something quietly dangerous about spending exhausted evenings watching women describe leaving their marriages, then cutting to solo travel, flat stomachs, and the implication that all of it came from choosing themselves. I started to believe my contentment was actually numbness. That Marcus's ordinary, consistent goodness was not a foundation, it was a ceiling. That staying was not loyalty. It was cowardice dressed as commitment. I had reframed my entire marriage without Marcus saying a single word. That was my first mistake. The second was walking into that hotel bar. His name was Daniel. Same company, different department. 2 years in the same building with nothing beyond corridor familiarity. The conference was in March. He was attractive in a way that felt personal, specifically calibrated to what I responded to. Attentive. Quick. He listened with his whole face. He paid attention to me in a room full of people the way Marcus hadn't in years, and I want to be honest about how powerful that felt. We talked for 4 hours at the hotel bar. He laughed at things I said that were not funny. He said I seemed like a woman running at half capacity because of the people around her. I should have heard that as a manipulation. I heard it as the most accurate diagnosis I had ever received. I went home, looked at Marcus sleeping, and felt nothing. That absence felt like an answer. 3 weeks later, constant texting. 6 weeks later, every line crossed. I told myself it was just an escape, not a real relationship. That Marcus would never find out. That if I was hurting inside the marriage, then I was the real victim, and therefore this was survival rather than betrayal. That the marriage had already been dying for years and I was just acknowledging what was already true. The lies we construct for ourselves are the most convincing ones we will ever encounter, because we are specifically the audience they were designed for. If I had been willing to look, the signs were everywhere. Daniel was vague about his personal life, the details never filled in the way they do when someone is actually open. He never invited me anywhere public. He canceled more than he showed up, and when I expressed any unhappiness, he got slightly cold. Not cruel. Just a few degrees cooler in a way that frightened me just enough to make me work harder for his warmth. I know exactly what that pattern is called. I chose not to recognize it because doing so would have meant losing the one thing making me feel visible. I was not interested in being educated. I was interested in being chosen. At home, I was disappearing. Quietly. Degree by degree. Lily would show me a drawing she had worked on for 20 minutes. I would glance at it before my phone buzzed and my eyes dropped. Caleb would climb into my lap for a story and I would read the words aloud while my brain was somewhere else entirely. Marcus would try to start a conversation and I would give short answers and feel quietly superior. I told myself the kids were fine. Children are resilient. They do not notice. Lily noticed. I know this because of something she said 8 months later that I will carry for the rest of my life. But I was too occupied managing two realities to see how badly I was failing at both. July. 4 months in. A Saturday morning that started with all the ordinary texture of every Saturday before it. Caleb still asleep. Lily in the living room watching cartoons, her cereal bowl going soggy the way it always did. I made scrambled eggs, Marcus's way, soft, not overdone, the way I had made them hundreds of times across 7 years of Saturday mornings in this kitchen. I put the plate in front of him. He was reading something on his phone. He looked at the plate. He exhaled. Not the exhale of irritation or impatience. The exhale of a man who has been quietly, privately, deeply tired of something for a long time and has finally stopped trying to conceal it. He said, mediocre. Did not look up. Did not follow it with anything. Just turned back to his phone and the kitchen stayed quiet and Lily's cartoons played from the other room and the coffee maker clicked off and he said nothing else for the entire rest of breakfast. I sat across from him with my own plate and felt something go completely flat inside me. Not hurt exactly. Not anger in any immediate way. Just flat. Like a room that has had all its air slowly removed and you only notice when you try to breathe. And in that flatness I thought about Daniel, the way he laughed at things I said, the good morning text that arrived before my alarm, the way he looked at me across a table like I was worth looking at. I thought, Marcus has absolutely no idea who he is talking to. That was the last complete lie I told myself. The most comfortable one. The one with the longest shelf life. But here is what I did not know then, Marcus had been watching for weeks. I had gotten comfortable. Dangerously, arrogantly comfortable. 4 months of getting away with it had made me feel untouchable, like the universe had quietly decided to look the other way. I had gotten lazy with deleting messages. I was using my personal phone more often. I had started dressing for work dinners with Daniel in ways I had not dressed for anything involving Marcus in over a year. He noticed in June. Said nothing. He watched. He gathered information with the patience of a man who understands that silence is sometimes the sharpest tool available. He is, above everything else, a careful man. I had spent years calling his carefulness distance. I understand now it was the opposite. August. A Sunday evening, the kind of late summer night that still holds warmth after dark. Lily was in bed. Caleb had fallen asleep on the couch. Marcus asked if he could use my laptop for a home repair project he had been planning. I said of course and handed it to him without thinking twice. I had left myself logged into the second email account, the one I made using my middle name, with a password disconnected from anything in my real life, containing 4 months of complete evidence. He came into the kitchen quietly, set the laptop on the counter, and looked at me. Not with anger. I had braced for anger, had run the scenario in my head and imagined shouting and accusations that would give me room to defend or deflect. His face was none of that. It was closed. Completely, finally, irrevocably closed. Like a door that has been gently but permanently shut, the latch engaged from the inside, with no handle on this side. I need you to tell me how long. 4 months. He nodded. Once. The nod of a man confirming something he already knew. Call your mother. Have her come stay with the kids tomorrow. I need a few days. Marcus. Please. He picked Caleb up from the couch and carried him to his room. Came back out. Turned off the kitchen light. Walked to the bedroom. Closed the door. No shouting. No plates. No speech. No crying. Just a soft, final click and the full weight of silence. I stood in the dark kitchen and texted Daniel immediately. Hands moving before my brain had fully caught up with what had just happened. I told him Marcus had found out. That I needed to talk. That I was scared. He left me on read for 6 hours. Then, at midnight, 1 line, that's a lot. Let's give it a few days. I sat on the couch where my son had been sleeping an hour earlier, in the house I had chosen and filled and lived inside for 4 years, and I tried to cry and couldn't. The absence of tears told me something I did not want to know about myself. I was not devastated about losing Marcus. I was terrified about what came next. About the structure collapsing. About the practical consequence of the thing I had been doing without ever fully reckoning with what it would cost. Grief for a person and fear of a consequence are not the same thing. I had the second. Not the first. That is the most honest thing I can tell you about where I actually was that night. I sat in the dark for a long time and finally understood what I had done. Not intellectually, I had always understood it intellectually. In my body. The way you understand something when the adrenaline fully drains and only the truth remains with nowhere left to hide. I had not taken everything. I had not built a new life. I had not chosen myself. I had handed everything away, piece by piece, over 4 months of small decisions that each felt survivable on their own. And the man I had handed it for was sitting somewhere across the city, reading my message, and deciding it was too much trouble to respond to tonight. I want to be precise about what happened next. Not to perform remorse for an audience. Not to make myself look better in retrospect than I was. Because the reality of what followed is unglamorous and imprecise and does not have a clean moral shape, and the only thing I owe anyone reading this is honesty about all of it, including the parts that reflect badly on me. Month 1, Divorce Lawyer Meetings. I sat in a beige office and described my marriage to a woman who had heard versions of this story dozens of times before. I watched her take notes without expression and understood for the first time, sitting in that chair, how ordinary my situation actually was. How completely unoriginal. Month 3, I moved out of the house. Marcus stayed, which made sense. The kids' school was close, their routines were anchored there, their entire lives were rooted in that neighborhood. I packed boxes. Loaded a moving van. Stood in the driveway for a moment before I got in. Lily stood at the front window and watched me go. She did not wave. Month 6, Daniel stopped responding entirely. Not dramatically. Just incrementally, then completely. Month 11, the divorce was finalized. Here is what I walked away from: 7 years and 2 children and a house I had genuinely loved, a 1-bedroom apartment 20 minutes away, a custody arrangement that gave Marcus primary physical custody, and 4 days per month with my children. 4 days per month. I need to stay with that number because I spent a long time moving past it quickly in my own head, because staying with it was unbearable. My daughter was 6 when the divorce was finalized. My son was 4. They were in the part of childhood that changes the fastest. I was present for 4 days out of every 30. I chose every step that led to that number. Daniel lasted exactly 6 weeks after Marcus found out. He did not end things in any painful, dramatic, or even honest way. He simply became gradually and strategically unavailable. Texts got shorter. Response times stretched from hours to days. 1 week he had a reason he couldn't meet. The next week another reason. I could see the pattern assembling in front of me but kept finding alternative interpretations because the obvious one was too expensive to accept. By week 6 he had stopped responding entirely. I went to his office building. His coworker came to the lobby and told me, with the careful politeness of someone delivering a message they did not write, that Daniel had asked not to be disturbed. He had asked not to be disturbed. The man I had burned my marriage down for had asked a coworker to manage me. I drove back to my apartment and sat in the parking lot and thought, with a clarity that felt almost surgical in its precision. I traded my children's daily life for a man who could not be bothered to send a text. That is the one line I will never be able to outrun. Not because anyone said it to me as an accusation. Because I said it to myself, quietly, in a parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon. And it was the most accurate, most devastatingly precise sentence I had ever produced. I sat with it for a long time before I went inside. Then I discovered, one by one, what the rest of the costs looked like. Renee went first. The friend who had told me I was too much woman for Marcus. Who had filled every phone call with encouragement and energy. Who had been the loudest voice in the chorus that told me choosing myself was the same as self-respect. She went quiet the moment the consequences became concrete and visible. I think what Renee had wanted was the idea of liberation, the highlight reel version, the before and after. Not the real version, which involves a custody hearing and a 6-year-old standing at a front window watching her mother's car pull out of the driveway without waving. When reality arrived, Renee got busy. Then she stopped calling. I heard through someone we both knew that she had quietly gotten back together with her own ex-husband. The couple friends, the ones accumulated over 7 years of neighborhood dinners and school events and Saturday afternoons at each other's houses, migrated toward Marcus. Not with any announcement or drama. They just stopped including me and continued including him, which was the rational decision given that he had done nothing wrong, had 2 young children, and still lived in the neighborhood they all shared. I do not entirely blame them. I understand the calculus. When something breaks and you have to decide which side of the break you stand on, you choose the side that makes sense. Marcus made sense. I had become, in my community, a cautionary tale people referenced quietly. November, I lost my job. Not directly because of the affair, not officially. Because I had spent the better part of a year occupying two lives simultaneously, and that kind of sustained fracture leaves marks on your professional performance in ways you do not fully track while you are in the middle of managing it. I had missed deadlines I had not missed before. I had attended meetings in body only. I had spent the accumulated goodwill of years of strong work on a period of coasting and absence. When the company did a round of layoffs and the people making decisions had recent data to look at, I was on the list. I sat in my manager's office and thought, I deserve to be here too. I moved back in with my parents at 34 years old. My mother received me with the particular gentle carefulness of a woman who has strong feelings she has made a conscious decision not to express. She set up the guest room. She made food. She asked careful questions about the kids and the job search and what I needed, and did not ask the question she was actually asking underneath all of it. My father said very little. He had liked Marcus in the specific way fathers like the men their daughters marry when those men are solid, present, and clearly intend to stay. He said very little for a very long time. When he did speak, it was about practical things, the lease I would eventually need, whether my resume was current. The silence in that house had a shape I knew and could trace. The shame is not what I had imagined. I had thought that if my marriage ended, I would feel some version of freedom. What I felt instead was something more specific and more public. People knew. Not from me. Information moves on its own once structure collapses. I would run into someone from the neighborhood at the grocery store and watch the calculation happen behind their eyes in real time, the processing, the selecting of a response. Sometimes they smiled too widely. Sometimes something aggressively cheerful that was worse than silence. Sometimes a woman I had liked would look at me across a produce aisle with something between pity and judgment, and I would understand that I had become a different category of person in her mind. I reached out to Marcus 3 times in the first 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Not to beg him back. I want to be careful and precise about this. Part of me did want him back, or wanted the life back, and I understand those are not the same thing, and even I could see that particular ship had not just sailed but had been decommissioned and taken apart. I reached out because I wanted him to hear that I was sorry in a way that was witnessed, that had weight. He responded to the 3rd message. Said he appreciated it. That he thought less contact was better for everyone's healing, including the children. That he hoped I was finding steadiness. Measured. Compassionate. Final. He had always been a careful man. He was careful in this too. The final blow did not come in the form of a legal document or a conversation with a lawyer or a phone call I had been dreading. It came from my 7-year-old daughter at a park on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of one of my 4 days. It was actually a good afternoon, one of those unexpected pockets where the weight lifts, and you are just a mother watching her children play without everything else sitting on top of it. Lily was pushing Caleb on the swing and he was laughing the way only 4-year-olds laugh, completely, from the whole body. I was watching them and feeling something that was close to peace. Just their mother. Whatever else I had lost, that part was still true. Then Lily stopped pushing. She walked over and stood in front of me with the gravity of a child who has been thinking about something for a long time and has arrived at the moment of saying it. She said, "Daddy says we're not supposed to ask why you don't live with us anymore. But I want to know if it was because you didn't want to." I told her I always wanted to be with her. Adult stuff. She didn't do anything wrong. She nodded. Turned back to the swing. Said quietly, "Okay." That okay hit me somewhere permanent. I am 35 now. 14 months since the divorce was finalized. 2 years since that Sunday night in August when the kitchen light went off and the door clicked shut. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from the house, the school, the neighborhood I chose and helped build and then lost through a sequence of choices that were entirely my own. I work a smaller job for less money. I go to therapy every Thursday. I have not dated anyone. I am honestly not sure what I would offer another person at this stage that would be worth the risk they would be taking on by being close to me. Marcus has moved on. I know this because Lily mentioned during a weekend visit that Daddy's friend had come for dinner and she was nice and had brought a dessert Lily liked. I smiled and said that sounded wonderful and asked what the dessert was and listened to Lily describe it in the detailed, digressive, breathlessly enthusiastic way she describes everything she loves. When we hung up, I went and sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could go inside. I forfeited the right to what I felt in that parking lot. I forfeited it over 4 months of decisions made in the wrong direction. But I felt it anyway. People ask me, in the way people ask when they are looking for a warning they can actually use, what I would tell someone who is where I was 2 years ago. Who is in a stable relationship and convinced that stability is the same as stagnation. Who has found someone who makes them feel electric in a way their partner no longer does, and is carefully assembling a case for why this feeling constitutes evidence of something. Here is what I would say: the person you're chasing is showing you the most curated, flattering, lowest stakes version of themselves. They are not showing you the tired version. The distracted at dinner version. The version that exists in ordinary daily time, in the accumulation of regular unremarkable days that make up an actual shared life. You are comparing that carefully presented highlight reel against the full, unedited reality of someone who has seen you at your worst and most boring and still showed up the next morning. You are calling that comparison data. It is not data. It is theater. The price of the ticket is everything you actually have. Lily called me last Tuesday on the phone we set up for her. She told me about a book she was reading for school, a story about a girl, a horse, a summer that changes everything, and she told it to me in the way she tells everything, breathlessly, out of order, circling back to correct herself, losing the thread and finding it again. I lay on my couch in my apartment and listened to every word. I did not check my phone. I did not let my attention drift even once. When we hung up, I held the phone against my chest for a long time and looked at the ceiling. 4 days a month. I thought I was building a life he would never touch. What I actually built was a distance I will spend the rest of mine trying to cross.